"Sir," Du said urgently, "they're approaching the command deck. We should evacuate to the escape pods." Tech stared at his second-in-command, with all four eyes narrowed in anger. "We do not retreat. We are Na'vi warriors." The bridge doors exploded inward, and smoke filled the command center. Through the haze, Commander Min led her team onto the bridge, weapons raised but not firing. "Counselor Tech," she said calmly, "your invasion has failed. I suggest you order your remaining forces to stand down before more lives are lost, yours included." Tech stared at the human soldier with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. His species had conquered 12 worlds by following the same successful strategy each time: overwhelming technological superiority, predictable military opposition, and eventual submission of the target species. Nothing in Na'vi military history had prepared them for humans. "You should have researched us better," Min continued, seeming to read his thoughts. "Humans don't surrender, we adapt." As Tech looked around at his defeated bridge crew, he realized the humans spoke the truth. The Na'vi had made a fatal error. They had judged humanity by its technology, not by its nature. They had seen the divisions between nations and assumed disunity. They had calculated human military strength, but failed entirely to account for human ingenuity. With a gesture of resignation, Tech activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All Na'vi forces," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Stand down, I repeat, stand down." 3 months after the surrender of the last Na'vi stronghold, the Grand Hall of the United Nations in Geneva buzzed with excitement. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the faces of representatives from every nation on Earth. The room had been expanded to accommodate additional delegates, including scientists, military leaders, and civilians who had played key roles in humanity's unexpected victory. Director Park stood at the podium, a holographic display hovering beside him, showing the schematics of a Na'vi starship. Despite the dark circles under his eyes from months of non-stop work, his voice was strong and clear. "The reverse engineering process is ahead of schedule," he announced, rotating the hologram with a gesture. "We've deciphered approximately 60% of their propulsion technology and 40% of their weapons systems." President Wu, now serving as the chair of the newly formed United Earth Council, nodded approvingly. "And the communications array?" "That's been our biggest breakthrough," Park replied with undisguised pride. "Thanks to researcher Yoon's team, we can now access the Na'vi Galactic Communication Network. We're picking up transmissions from at least 17 other spacefaring civilizations." A murmur ran through the assembly. For millennia, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the answer was a resounding no, and more importantly, they had earned their place among the stars, not through peaceful contact, but by successfully defending their home. In a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Professor Lee supervised the examination of the Na'vi flagship's data core. The captured vessel had yielded a treasure trove of information about the wider galactic community, most of which humanity had been completely unaware of until now. "It's like finding a library when you didn't even know books existed," she told her team as they sorted through the alien encyclopedia. "According to this, there's something called the Galactic Assembly, a coalition of advanced civilizations that governs interstellar relations." Her assistant looked up from his terminal. "Do the Na'vi belong to this assembly?" "Yes," Lee said, frowning slightly. "They're listed as enforcement agents, basically the military arm for dealing with primitive worlds." "Like us," the assistant said quietly. Lee nodded. "Like us. Or at least, what they thought we were." Across the globe, humanity was changing in ways both subtle and profound. Children played with toys, modeled after the ships that had defended Earth. University enrollment in physics, engineering, and xenobiology had tripled. Former rivals on the global stage now collaborated on joint projects, the old borders and conflicts seeming increasingly trivial in the face of what they now knew existed beyond their world. In what had once been a Na'vi command post in the Siberian wilderness, Engineer Kang supervised the integration of alien technology with human systems. His team had grown from a handful of Korean aerospace engineers to hundreds of specialists from dozens of countries. "The materials are the key," he explained. to a group of visiting officials, holding up a piece of the distinctive Navi metal alloy. It's not just advanced. It's designed at the molecular level for specific properties. Once we understood that principle, we could begin adapting our manufacturing. A Russian physicist raised her hand. But surely it will take decades to reproduce their level of technology. Kang smiled. That's what makes this situation unique. We don't need to follow their development path. We can combine their knowledge with our own approaches. He gestured to a prototype vehicle in the corner of the hangar. This uses Navi propulsion principles, but with our own control systems. Systems they never considered, because they think differently than we do. 6 months to the day after the invasion began, the United Earth Council voted unanimously to send a delegation to the Galactic Assembly. The decision wasn't made lightly. Some argued humanity should focus on strengthening defenses before revealing themselves further. Others insisted that isolation would only lead to another invasion, perhaps by an even more powerful species. "We go as equals, not as supplicants," Council President June declared to global applause. "We have earned our place at that table." The ship chosen for this historic journey was the Phoenix, a hybrid vessel incorporating both human design and captured Navi technology. Its crew represented every continent, chosen for their expertise rather than political connections. On the day of launch, billions watched on screens around the world as the sleek craft rose from its pad in New Zealand, its engines glowing with an otherworldly blue light as it accelerated toward the stars. Commander Min stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, watching Earth shrink behind them. After leading the boarding party that captured the Navi flagship, she had been the unanimous choice. To command humanity's first official interstellar mission, "Navigation confirms we're on course," reported her pilot. "The Navi star charts match our calculations perfectly." In the secure holding area near the back of the ship, former Counselor Tech sat in contemplative silence. The decision to bring him had been controversial, but ultimately practical. He knew the protocols of the assembly and could guide the humans through their initial contact. "We're approaching the jump point," Min informed him during her daily visit. "Your assembly will soon know we're coming." Tech looked up at her with all 4 eyes blinking in sequence. A gesture Min had learned indicated deep thought. "They already know," he said quietly. "News of our failure spread quickly. The assembly has never encountered a species like yours before." "And how do you think they'll respond?" Min asked. Tech made a gesture that approximated a human shrug. "The assembly fears the unknown. Your victory was unexpected, unprecedented." 3 days later, the Phoenix decelerated into orbit around a massive space station, the headquarters of the Galactic Assembly. It dwarfed any structure humans had ever built, a spinning wheel of light and metal housing representatives from dozens of spacefaring civilizations. As the human delegation prepared to board, Min visited Tech one final time. "Any last advice before we meet your assembly?" The former invasion commander considered for a moment. "Be yourselves," he finally said. "That is what makes you dangerous. That is what makes you valuable." The reception chamber of the assembly fell silent as the human delegation entered. Representatives of 12 advanced species watched with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and thinly veiled concern as President June led her team forward. At his request, Tech walked beside them, his presence causing visible surprise among the EA assembly members. When invited to address the gathering, Tech stepped forward. His once proud stance was humbler now, but his voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. "Honored representatives, you see before you the species that defeated the collective's finest invasion force. They look soft. Their world has breathable atmospheres. Their bodies break easily." He paused, looking directly at the Geronian delegates, known for their territorial ambitions. "But never ever make them angry." As murmurs spread through the chamber and other expansionist empires exchanged concerned glances, humanity took its first confident steps into a much larger universe, a species that had proven itself not through conquest, but by refusing to be conquered. He paused, looking at the image of Earth rotating slowly on his display. "Tomorrow I will send our findings to Alliance High Command and recommend first contact with humanity. Our war has consumed countless species over hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps it's fitting that its end might come from the most unlikely place, a small blue planet on the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm, home to beings who have barely begun to look toward the stars. As the Pathfinder's communication array finally came back online, Jin composed the message that would forever alter humanity's place in the galaxy. He couldn't know that within months, representatives from a civilization older than human recorded history would stand before Earth's leaders with an impossible request: help end a war that had raged for 800,000 years. On Earth below, humans went about their lives, unaware they were being observed, unaware of the ancient conflict that consumed the galaxy around them, and unaware of the unique gift they possessed that might finally bring peace to the stars. The United Nations. General Assembly Hall had never been so still. Delegates from every nation sat frozen in their seats, eyes fixed on the beings standing at the podium. The 7 visitors were humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin had a faint bluish tint, their eyes were larger and more widely spaced, and they stood nearly 7 feet tall. But it wasn't their appearance that had rendered the room silent. It was what they had just said. President Cho of the Global Council leaned forward, her voice barely steady. "Let me make sure I understand correctly. You're saying that your civilization has been at war for 800,000 years. Ambassador Song, the Alliance representative who had been chosen to lead the delegation, nodded. That is correct. The conflict between the Stellar Alliance and the Void Collective predates your species' emergence from primitive hominids. The enormity of this statement washed over the room. Humans measured their ancient history in thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands. The idea of a war lasting longer than human existence was almost impossible to grasp. And you want our help? General Lee asked from his position next to the president. His skepticism was evident. You have technology that appears to be centuries beyond ours. Your ships can cross the galaxy. You have weapons we can barely comprehend. What could we possibly offer you? Ambassador Song gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the hall. It showed thousands of star systems, some glowing blue, others red, with battle lines clearly marked between them. This is our galaxy as it stands. Today, Song explained, the Alliance controls approximately half, the Collective the other half. For nearly 1 million years, these lines have barely moved. We develop new weapons, they develop new defenses. They create new strategies. We counter them. We are locked in perfect eternal stalemate, and it's killing us all. The hologram shifted to show planets stripped of resources, massive space installations crumbling, entire solar systems devastated by weapons of unimaginable power. Our civilizations are dying, Song continued, her voice softer now. Both sides. The war consumes everything: resources, lives, hope. Our projections indicate total societal collapse within 50 of your years if the conflict continues, President. Cho's scientific advisor, Dr. Jin, stood up. I still don't understand what humans could possibly contribute to this situation. At this, another Alliance representative stepped forward. He was shorter than the others, with features that suggested he came from a different species within their coalition. You think differently, he said simply. Your neural architecture allows for connections that our species don't naturally make. You call it creativity, lateral thinking, intuition, but to us, it's almost like a superpower. A superpower, General. Lee repeated flatly. Let me demonstrate, the alien said. He activated another hologram, this one showing a military standoff. This is a tactical puzzle from one of our historical battles. Both sides have equal forces. According to all our strategic doctrines, there is no solution that doesn't end in mutual destruction. The room watched as the holographic forces moved through various configurations, always ending with both sides annihilated. Our top military minds spent decades trying to solve this problem, the alien continued. Now I'll show you what happened when we presented it to a group of your military academy students yesterday. The hologram reset, but this time the forces moved in completely unexpected ways. One side appeared to retreat in disarray, drawing the enemy into a seemingly abandoned sector. Then, from hidden positions that had been established during the retreat, They launched an overwhelming counterattack. The battle ended with minimal losses on one side and a clear victory. They solved it in under an hour, the alien said quietly, using a concept they called feigned retreat, something so obvious to them that they were surprised we didn't see it. But in 800,000 years of warfare, neither the Alliance nor the Collective has ever considered this approach. Murmur went through the hall as the implications sank in. This is just one example, Ambassador Song said, taking control of the presentation again. We've run similar tests with problems from medicine, resource allocation, energy distribution, all areas critical to the war effort. In every case, humans found solutions that our civilizations never conceived of, despite hundreds of thousands of years trying. The next several hours were filled with questions, demonstrations, and heated debate. Some human representatives were eager to help, seeing opportunity in alliance with an advanced civilization. Others were suspicious, fearing humanity might be dragged into an alien conflict not of their making. A few even suggested that the visitors might not be telling the complete truth, that perhaps they saw humans as useful tools rather than partners. As the formal session ended and broke into smaller discussions, President Cho found herself in a private room with Ambassador Song and just a few key advisors. "Why now?" she asked bluntly. "If your war has gone on for so long, why reach out to us at this particular moment?" Song's expression grew somber. "Because we're losing, both sides are. Not to each other, but to the war itself. Resources that once seemed infinite are now scarce. Stars we've harvested for energy are burning out. Populations that once numbered in the trillions have dwindled to billions. And our thinking has calcified. 800,000 years following the same patterns has left us unable to see alternatives." Dr. Jin, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "You're desperate." "Yes," Song admitted without hesitation. "We are desperate. Our discovery of your world was chance, a damaged scout ship making an emergency jump. But in that accident we may have found salvation. Not just for the Alliance, but for the Collective as well. For all sentient life in the galaxy." General Lee leaned forward. "And what exactly would you want from us? Our military is nothing compared to yours." "Not your weapons or your ships," Song clarified. "Your minds. We're requesting a small advisory team. Your best strategic thinkers, diplomats, problem solvers, people who can look at our ancient conflict with fresh eyes." President Cho considered this. "And what would Earth receive in return?" "Protection for one," Song replied. "Once your involvement becomes known, the Collective may see Earth as a target. We would shield your world with our most advanced defensive systems. Beyond that, we offer knowledge, controlled technological advancement that won't destabilize your civilization. And eventually, membership in a peaceful galactic community. If we succeed." The negotiations continued for weeks. Earth's nations argued among themselves. Some saw opportunity, others danger. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of alien life. Scientists clamored for access to Alliance technology. Military strategists warned of becoming pawns in an incomprehensible cosmic game. In the end, pragmatism won out. Humanity, despite its divisions, recognized both the responsibility and the opportunity presented to them. A compromise was reached. Earth would provide advisors to the Alliance while maintaining its independence. In return, the Alliance would share limited technology and guarantee Earth's protection. 3 months after the aliens' arrival, a team of 50 humans, strategists, diplomats, scientists, and creative thinkers from across the globe, boarded an Alliance vessel in Earth orbit. As the massive ship prepared to jump to Alliance space, team leader Professor Kang looked back at the blue planet through a viewport. "I never thought I'd leave Earth," she said quietly to no one in particular. "Now we're going to try to end a war that's older than our species." Beside her, General Wu nodded solemnly. "Either we succeed and change the course of galactic history, or we'll be a footnote in the final chapter of a very, very long book." The ship's engines hummed, the stars blurred, and humanity took its first step onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or victims, but as problem solvers in a conflict so ancient that its origins had been forgotten by those still fighting it. The Alliance Grand Strategy Center on Proxima Station was the most secure military facility in controlled space. For thousands of years, the greatest tactical minds had gathered here to plan war efforts against the collective. Now, for the first time in its history, aliens walked its hallowed halls. But these aliens came not as enemies or even allies, but as advisors. General Han stepped into the central planning chamber and felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. 50 humans had arrived 3 weeks ago, and still they were viewed with a mixture of curiosity, hope, and undisguised skepticism. The chamber fell silent as she approached the massive holographic table where Alliance commanders stood reviewing. "Battle plans, you're late," said Fleet Commander Tech, an imposing figure whose species had evolved on a high-gravity world. His people had been fighting in the war for over 50,000 years. "I was reviewing your historical archives," Han replied, unintimidated. 800,000 years of them. A murmur went through the assembled officers. The human team had been granted unprecedented access to military records spanning nearly 1,000,000 years of conflict. Most Alliance strategists specialized in specific eras or battle theaters. No one attempted to grasp the entirety of the war's history. "And what brilliant insights have you gleaned?" asked another commander sarcastically. Despite the formal welcome they'd received, many Alliance officers viewed the humans as primitive curiosities at best, dangerous distractions at worst. Han didn't answer immediately. Instead, she touched controls on the holographic table, and the display changed to show a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of battle sites highlighted across the spiral arms. "You've been fighting the same war for longer than my species has existed," she said finally. "But you've never actually seen your enemy." Confused glances passed between the Alliance commanders. "Of course we've seen the enemy," Tech responded. "We've fought the collective across 10,000 worlds." Han shook her head. "You've seen their ships, their weapons, their tactics, but you don't know who they are, what drives them, what they fear, what they hope for. In all your records, there's not a single attempt at genuine communication in over 700,000 years." "Communication?" another officer scoffed. "They want to destroy us, we want to destroy them. What is there to communicate about?" At that moment, Professor Kang entered the chamber, followed by several other members of the human advisory team. Unlike Han, who had a military background, Kang was a historian and anthropologist. "Why did this war start?" she asked, joining Han at the table. The question hung in the air. Finally, one of the older commanders answered. "The collective attempted to seize control of the Andromeda Gateway. That aggression could not go unanswered." "That was 800,000 years ago," Kang pointed out. "Is that still why you're fighting? Does anyone even use the Andromeda Gateway anymore?" Uncomfortable silence followed. The truth was that the gateway had been destroyed over 500,000 years ago in a particularly vicious battle. The war had continued anyway, fueled by generations of hatred and loss. "We've reviewed your battle histories," Han continued, changing the display to show various conflict zones. "You fight with perfect logic, precise formations, optimal resource allocation. But war isn't logical, it never has been." "Perhaps not for primitives," Tech said coldly. Han smiled, unbothered by the insult. "Let me show you something." She brought up footage that the human team had created, reconstructions of Earth's historical battles. Alliance officers watched, with growing disbelief as human armies employed deception, misdirection, feigned retreats, nighttime assaults, weather exploitation, psychological warfare, tactics that often defied conventional logic but achieved results. "Your species evolved as social predators," Han explained. "We hunted in groups, but we also fought each other constantly, not for hundreds of thousands of years, but in constantly evolving ways. When one approach failed, we tried something completely different. Our entire history is a testament to adaptation." For the next several hours, the human team outlined a radically different approach to the war. Where the Alliance saw only frontal assault possibilities, Han suggested targeting supply lines. Where they sought technological solutions, Kang proposed diplomatic ones. Where they planned for direct confrontation, the humans recommended asymmetric warfare. "You have ships that can cloak," said Technician G, another human advisor, "but you only use them for reconnaissance. Why not for surgical strikes against key targets? Because that would be dishonorable." an Alliance commander replied, struggling with the concept. Warfare has protocols. Protocols that have led to stalemate for nearly 1,000,000 years, G countered. Day after day, the sessions continued. Some Alliance commanders stormed out, offended by suggestions that contradicted military doctrines older than human civilization. Others listened with growing interest, particularly younger officers who had witnessed the increasing desperation of their forces. 4 months into their advisory role, the humans faced their first real test. A major collective offensive threatened the Vega sector, home to billions of Alliance citizens. Traditional response would commit the bulk of the Alliance fleet to a direct confrontation, a battle that simulations showed would result in massive casualties on both sides with no strategic advantage gained. Instead, Han proposed something radical. Let them take it. You want us to abandon billions of our people? Admiral Kor asked incredulously during an emergency session of the High Command. No, Han replied calmly. We want you to evacuate as many as possible through these corridors. She indicated safe passage routes on the map, while making it appear that you're preparing for a massive defense. Then, when the collective commits their forces to occupation, we strike not at Vega, but here. She highlighted a completely different sector of space, the Arcturus shipyards. Admiral Kor was stunned. That's the heart of collective industrial production. Han nodded. Exactly, they'll have minimal defenses during the Vega operation. Your intelligence suggests they're committing 80% of their battle-ready forces to the Vega offensive. This is not how we wage war, said an elder commander, his voice trembling with either age or emotion. That's precisely why it might work, Kang added gently. 800,000 years of the same approaches has made both sides predictable to each other. The collective expects you to defend Vega because you always have. They won't expect you to think like humans. After heated debate that lasted 3 days, the Alliance High Command approved the plan. Not out of conviction, but desperation. The Alliance had been losing ground steadily for the past century. Traditional approaches had failed. What did they have to lose? The operation proceeded with precision, as collective forces poured into the Vega sector, expecting the usual head-to-head confrontation. Alliance civilians were quietly evacuated through hidden corridors. Meanwhile, the bulk of the Alliance fleet used secret jump routes plotted by human navigators to reach the undefended Arcturus shipyards. The results exceeded even the humans' expectations. The collective lost 60% of their industrial capacity in a single day, with minimal Alliance casualties. For the first time in over 10,000 years, the Alliance had achieved a decisive strategic victory. In the aftermath, as the Alliance High Command gathered to assess the results, the mood was one of stunned disbelief. Centuries of stalemate had been broken by a strategy conceived by members of a species that had barely achieved spaceflight. This is just the beginning, Han told them during the debriefing. Your war has become ritualized, predictable. Both sides fight as if following a script written millennia ago. We're going to help you tear up that script. Admiral Kor, who had been skeptical of the human advisors from the start, finally asked the question that had been troubling many Alliance commanders. These tactics, deception, misdirection, striking the undefended rather than meeting strength. With strength, aren't they dishonorable by the standards of civilized warfare? Han met his gaze steadily. With respect, Admiral, there is nothing civilized about a war that has consumed countless lives across 800 millennia. The most honorable thing we can do is end it, by any means necessary. As news of the unprecedented victory spread throughout Alliance territory, attitudes toward the human advisors began to shift. What had begun as reluctant tolerance evolved into cautious respect. The humans brought not just new tactics, but new ways of thinking about a conflict so ancient that its participants had forgotten how to see it with fresh eyes. And in distant collective territory, for the first time in thousands of years, uncertainty and fear began to spread among the leadership. Something had changed in their eternal enemy. The predictable patterns of 800 millennia had been broken. The war was entering a new phase, one that would lead to its unexpected conclusion. The observation deck of the Earth Diplomatic, Vessel Hope hung in space at the precise midpoint between Alliance and collective territories. Through its massive transparent dome, representatives from both ancient powers could see the swirling stars of the galaxy they had fought over for nearly 1,000,000 years. The symbolism wasn't subtle, neutral ground, provided by a species that, until recently, hadn't known either faction existed. Inside, tension filled the air as delegates seated themselves on opposite sides of a circular table. 2 years had passed since humans had first joined the Alliance as advisors. 2 years of unprecedented military and diplomatic developments that had shaken the foundations of the galaxy's oldest conflict. Mediator Kang stood at the center of the room, somehow appearing calm despite the historical weight of the moment. As the leader of Earth's diplomatic team, she had worked tirelessly to arrange this meeting, the first direct peace talk between the warring factions in over 700,000 years. "We gather today under the protection of Earth neutrality," she began, her voice steady. "Both delegations have agreed to temporary ceasefire terms throughout all battle zones. For the first time in thousands of generations, no shots are being fired across our galaxy." The Alliance representatives sat stiffly, uncomfortable with the proximity of their ancient enemies. On the other side, the collective delegates, seen in person by most Alliance members for the first time, appeared equally tense. Despite superficial differences in appearance, the two groups shared the unmistakable bearing of civilizations that had known nothing but war for their entire recorded histories. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Kang continued, "I'd like to share a discovery made by our research team." She nodded to Professor G, who activated a holographic display at the center of the table. Ancient texts appeared alongside linguistic analyses and translation matrices. "These are the original communications that preceded the start of your conflict," G explained. "The messages exchanged between your civilizations immediately before the first shots were fired at the Andromeda Gateway 800,000 years ago." A murmur went through the room. Few living beings had ever seen these historical documents. They had been preserved only in the most restricted archives, viewed as sacred texts that justified eternal war. "Our linguists have made a discovery," G continued. "The message from the collective that the Alliance interpreted as a declaration of territorial aggression, the message that sparked this war, was deliberately mistranslated. The Alliance delegation erupted in objections, while the collective representatives leaned forward with sudden interest. "Please," Kang raised her hands for silence. "The evidence is clear. Compare the original text with the translation provided to Alliance leadership 800 millennia ago." The hologram showed both versions side by side, with key discrepancies highlighted. "The original message was not a claim of ownership over the Andromeda Gateway," G explained. "It was a request for shared access and cooperative exploration. But the translation provided to your leaders stated it as an ultimatum and territorial demand." An elderly Alliance diplomat rose shakily to his feet. "This is preposterous. Why would our ancestors falsify such a document?" "Power," replied General Han, entering the chamber with a stack of additional records. "We found these in your military archives, sealed for 790,000 years." The new documents appeared in the holographic display. Internal communications between early Alliance military leaders who had orchestrated the mistranslation. "Your military leadership feared peace," Han said bluntly. "They had built their authority on the threat of collective expansion. Actual cooperation would have diminished their influence, so they ensured conflict instead." The room fell silent as delegates from both sides absorbed this revelation. Generations upon generations had lived and died fighting a war that began with a lie so ancient that even the lie itself had been forgotten. "This doesn't explain 800,000 years of continued conflict," a collective representative finally said, their voice translated through communication devices. "No," Kang agreed, "but it explains how it started. What kept it going was momentum, the self-perpetuating cycle of retaliation, vengeance, and eventually tradition. After enough time, fighting became your civilization's purpose. War became your culture, your economy, your reason for existence." A younger Alliance diplomat spoke next. "Even if this is true, even if our war began under false pretenses, that doesn't erase the genuine grievances and losses of countless generations since. You're absolutely right, Kang acknowledged. Nothing can undo 800 millennia of suffering, but understanding the truth gives you a choice about the future. For the next 12 hours, the discussion continued, sometimes heated, sometimes somber, occasionally breaking down completely before human mediators guided it back on track. Long-buried truths emerged. Political realities were acknowledged. The enormous difficulty of unwinding military economies that spanned thousands of worlds was confronted. As the galactic rotation brought a new perspective of stars into view through the observation dome, something remarkable happened. A senior collective diplomat rose and approached the Alliance side of the table, crossing a divide that had existed for longer than most species in the room had existed. "My great-grandparent died fighting your forces at the Battle of Deneb," the diplomat said to an Alliance counterpart. "I grew up hearing stories of Alliance atrocities, trained from birth to continue their fight. I have served the war effort for 300 years, but today I wonder, what might my life have been if I had been born to peace instead?" The Alliance diplomat hesitated, then stood to face his enemy directly. "I wonder the same thing. My entire species has known nothing but this conflict. We have forgotten how to build rather than destroy, to create rather than kill." In that moment, something shifted in the room, a collective realization that perhaps the true enemy wasn't seated across the table, but was the war itself. A conflict so ancient and all-consuming that it had enslaved both sides equally, devouring resources, lives, and hope for hundreds of thousands of years. 3 months later, on that same observation deck, the preliminary peace accords were signed. Not a complete resolution. Untangling 800 millennia of conflict would take generations, but a framework for moving forward. For the first time since before humans had evolved on Earth, the galaxy's dominant powers agreed to lay down their arms and begin the long, difficult process of learning to coexist. As the signing ceremony concluded, Admiral Tech, once the most vocal critic of human involvement, approached the Earth delegation. "How did you know it would work?" he asked. "General Han, how could you be certain that peace was even possible after so long?" Han smiled slightly. "We didn't know. But 800,000 years of the same approach guaranteed continued failure. Sometimes you need fresh eyes to see what's been there." All along, on the journey back to Earth, the human team gathered in their ship's common area, watching the stars streak by outside. They had accomplished what had once seemed impossible, helping to end a conflict that predated their species. "What do you think happens now?" asked G, watching the cosmic blur of faster-than-light travel. Kang looked thoughtful. "For us? We go home as the species that helped broker peace for the galaxy. For them? They face something perhaps more difficult than war, learning to live without it after so long." "They'll need our help with that too," Han observed. "Building peace is harder than waging war, always has been, for every civilization." As Earth came into view, a small blue sphere that had unknowingly existed alongside an ancient galactic conflict, the humans felt the weight of their new reality. Their world was no longer an isolated outpost on the edge of an unexplored galaxy, but a central player in reshaping the cosmic order. The war that had raged for 800,000 years hadn't ended through superior firepower or technological advantage, but through something much simpler and more powerful: the fresh perspective of a young species that still remembered how to see problems with new eyes and still believed that even the most entrenched conflicts could find resolution. In the vast tapestry of galactic history, humanity had written its first chapter, not as conquerors or victims, but as peacemakers in a war older than their existence.